When I was younger, I thought ADHD was just about kids who couldn't sit still in class, the ones always getting in trouble for talking too much or forgetting their homework. But then I started seeing something else, brilliant, creative, driven adults who were struggling, not because they weren't smart or capable, but because their brains just worked differently. And here's the truth. ADHD in adults is real. It's not just about being easily distracted or bad at time management. It's about living in a world that was never designed for the way your brain processes information. It's about feeling like you're constantly playing catch up while everyone else seems to have a manual you never got. First, let's talk about focus, or what most people misunderstand about it. ADHD isn't about not paying attention. It's about paying attention to everything at once. It's like having 50 browser tabs open in your brain, all playing videos at full volume. And when something truly grabs your attention, boom, hyperfocus. Hours disappear and suddenly you're the most productive person alive. Until, of course, reality crashes in and you realize you forgot to eat. Now, if you don't have ADHD, this might sound confusing. How can someone struggle with focus but also be capable of getting lost in something for hours? That's the paradox. ADHD isn't a lack of attention. It's an inconsistent regulation of attention. It's a brain that either latches onto something with everything it has or can't seem to hold on to anything at all. And that switch, it's not controlled by willpower or discipline. It's chemistry, dopamine. The brain's motivation molecule plays a huge role in this. For most people, tasks like answering emails or paying bills might not be fun, but they still get a little dopamine boost from completing them, a sense of reward, accomplishment. But for someone with ADHD, that boost isn't guaranteed. The brain is understimulated, constantly searching for something that feels rewarding enough to hold on to. That's why mundane tasks, laundry, paperwork, meal planning, feel impossible. There's no internal push to get started. But when something does spark interest, that's a whole different story. This is where hyperfocus kicks in. A person with ADHD can go from struggling to start anything to diving headfirst into something so deeply they lose track of time, hunger, even sleep. It's why an ADHD brain can binge read an entire book series in 2 days, but struggle to remember to take out the trash. It's not about what's important. It's about what's stimulating. And here's where the shame piece sneaks in. Because when you live in a world that expects consistent productivity, being told you're lazy or not trying hard enough stings. When you hear, if you can focus on this, why can't you focus on that? Enough times, you start wondering the same thing. Maybe it is just a matter of willpower. Maybe you should be able to just push through. But here's the truth. Attention isn't a choice. It's not something you just do. It's a process controlled by brain chemistry, by neurological wiring. Telling someone with ADHD to just focus is like telling someone with nearsightedness to just see farther. It doesn't work like that. And I get it. To the outside world, it can be frustrating. A person with ADHD might seem unreliable, on top of the world one day, completely scattered the next. But inside, it's not about effort. It's about an invisible tug of war between what their brain wants to focus on and what the world expects them to focus on. Now imagine living like that every day. Imagine waking up knowing you have a to-do list, but feeling completely paralyzed by it. Not because you don't care, but because your brain just can't latch on to it. Then imagine the moment something finally clicks and suddenly you're all in. You've cracked the code. You're working at lightning speed, making up for lost time, feeling unstoppable until you look up and realize you missed your kid's soccer game again. That's the emotional weight of ADHD, the highs of hyperfocus, the lows of forgetfulness, the guilt of knowing you can be productive, but not knowing when or how you'll be able to access that focus again. And this is why understanding ADHD matters, because when we shift from why can't you just focus to how does your brain work best, we open up new possibilities. Maybe it's using timers, accountability partners, or breaking tasks into smaller dopamine rewarding steps. Maybe it's allowing more flexibility in how work gets done instead of forcing it into a rigid structure that doesn't fit. ADHD isn't about a lack of ability, it's about a mismatch between how the brain operates and how the world expects it to operate. And when we start making space for that, the frustration, the shame, the self-doubt, it starts to lose its grip. Second, there's time blindness, one of the most frustrating parts. Imagine walking into a bookstore, getting lost in the aisles, and thinking you've been there for 10 minutes when really it's been 3 hours. For people with ADHD, time isn't a steady stream. It's now and not now. Deadlines sneak up like jump scares. Important tasks vanish into some mental abyss. And no, it's not laziness. It's a brain wired to perceive time differently. Time for most people is like a well-organized filing cabinet. There's a clear sense of past, present, and future. You know what's coming up next and you plan accordingly. But for someone with ADHD, time is more like a fog. There's what's happening right now, whatever is directly in front of them, and then there's everything else floating somewhere in the distance. The problem is the distance doesn't feel real until it's suddenly right in front of them. This is why deadlines are tricky. It's not that someone with ADHD doesn't care about getting things done. It's that their brain doesn't send the same signals that say, hey, this is getting closer, start now. Instead, there's this quiet, almost deceptive sense that there's always time until there isn't. And when that moment finally hits, it's panic mode, it's an all-nighter, it's a flurry of adrenaline-fueled focus that, ironically, might produce some of their best work. But at what cost? Now, if this pattern repeats enough times, it starts to shape a person's identity. The missed appointments, the last-minute scrambles, the forgotten birthdays, it all feeds into this painful narrative of, I'm irresponsible, I'm unreliable, I can't be trusted. And that narrative, it's brutal because it's not just about time anymore. It's about who they believe they are. And here's what's really unfair. Most people assume this is just a lack of discipline, that if someone with ADHD really wanted to be on time, they would be. But that's not how this works. The brain's internal clock, the thing that helps regulate a natural sense of time, is often underactive in ADHD. It's not a matter of choice, it's a neurological difference. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like setting alarms, then snoozing them because they don't feel urgent yet. It looks like underestimating how long things take every single time. It looks like hyper-focusing on the wrong task because it felt like the most important thing at that moment, while the actual deadline sits in the background, unnoticed. But here's the thing, understanding this pattern is the first step in working with it instead of against it, because once you know that time doesn't naturally register the same way, you stop beating yourself up for struggling with it. Instead, you start building systems, external reminders, visual timers, body doubling where someone else is present to help create a sense of urgency, tools that make time visible instead of letting it slip away. And the biggest shift is learning to separate struggles with time from self-worth. Because missing deadlines, running late, or getting lost in hyper-focus doesn't mean someone is careless or disrespectful. It means their brain processes time differently. And when you stop shaming yourself for the way your brain works, you make space for something else, finding ways to work with it. Third, let's talk about emotions. Because ADHD isn't just about focus. It's about feeling everything at full volume. Rejection, frustration, excitement. There's no dimmer switch. One piece of criticism can spiral into self-doubt. One burst of motivation can lead to 3 unfinished projects at once. Emotional regulation isn't just tough, it's exhausting. Now, here's something most people don't realize. ADHD isn't just a disorder of attention. It's a disorder of regulation, of emotions, impulses, motivation. The same way an ADHD brain struggles to regulate focus, it also struggles to regulate emotions. And that means emotions don't just come and go quietly. They hit like a tidal wave. Take rejection, for example. Most people don't like rejection. It stings, it's uncomfortable. But for someone with ADHD, it can feel physically unbearable. There's actually a term for this, rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's when even perceived rejection, an unread text, a neutral tone of voice, feels like a personal failure. And when that emotion takes over, it's instant. There's no slow buildup. No, let me think this through rationally. It's boom, a flood of shame, self-doubt, maybe even anger. And before there's time to catch it, the mind is already spinning. They're mad at me. I'm messed up. I always do this. And it's not just rejection, excitement, frustration, overwhelm. Everything is turned up to 10. And in those moments, trying to tell yourself to calm down is like trying to put out a fire with a paper fan. The emotion is already there. And if you don't know how to work with it, it takes over. This is where impulsivity comes in. Because when emotions hit fast and hard, reacting without thinking becomes second nature. Saying something too quickly, making a big decision in the heat of the moment, abandoning one task for another because the excitement shifted. And then when the emotion fades, reality sets in. Why did I do that? And here comes the shame cycle again. And let's talk about frustration, because this one is huge. Living with ADHD means constantly bumping up against things that feel harder than they should be. Simple tasks like replying to an email, remembering where you put your keys, or finishing something you actually care about. When those things slip through the cracks, it's frustrating, but not just in an, oh, well, I'll try again later way. It's a deep gut punch frustration that builds over time. Because when something feels harder than it should be, it's easy to start thinking, maybe I'm just not good enough. So what happens? You push harder. You tell yourself you should be able to control it. You try to suppress the emotions to act like they're not there. But emotions don't work like that. They don't disappear just because we ignore them. They wait. And they come back louder. This is why emotional regulation strategies aren't just helpful for ADHD. They're necessary. It's not about controlling emotions. It's about learning how to slow them down before they take over. That could mean naming the emotion out loud, taking a pause before reacting, finding healthy ways to release the intensity, exercise, deep breathing, anything that helps create a space between feeling the emotion and acting on it. Because the truth is, an ADHD brain feels deeply. That's not a weakness, it's a strength. The passion, the excitement, the creativity, all of it comes from the same place. The key isn't to shut it down. It's to learn how to ride the waves instead of getting pulled under. Fourth, there's executive function, the mental CEO. That helps you plan, organize, and prioritize. With ADHD, that CEO is often out to lunch, remembering appointments, starting tasks, following through. It's not about willpower. It's about a brain that struggles to transition from I should do this to I'm doing it now. Now let's be honest. We live in a world that expects organization, structure, and follow through. There's this unspoken rule that if something is important, you'll just do it. Need to pay a bill? Pay it. Need to start a project? Just start. But for someone with ADHD, it's never that simple. Because if the brain's executive function isn't firing at full capacity, even the smallest task can feel like climbing a mountain. Imagine knowing you need to start something. Maybe it's replying to an email, making a phone call, or tackling a work project. You want to do it. You might even feel guilty for not doing it. But instead of just starting, your brain slams on the brakes. It's like trying to push a car that's stuck in park. No matter how much you tell yourself, just go, just start, just do it, nothing happens. And here's where things get tricky, because from the outside, this can look like procrastination, like avoidance, like you just don't care enough to put in the effort. But that's not what's happening. What's really happening is a neurological bottleneck. The brain is struggling to bridge the gap between intention and action. And the longer it takes, the heavier the guilt becomes. Now, add another layer to this, task switching. Most people can smoothly move from one task to another. They finish one thing, shift gears, and start something new. But for an ADHD brain, transitions are rough. Going from rest mode to work mode can feel impossible. That's why starting a task in the first place is so difficult. But once hyperfocus kicks in, stopping is just as hard. And prioritization, that's another battle. It's not that someone with ADHD doesn't want to prioritize, it's that everything feels equally urgent or equally unimportant. There's no natural sense of hierarchy. A work deadline and a random thought about reorganizing the spice cabinet might carry the same weight. And if the spices win, it's not because of a lack of responsibility. It's because in that moment, that's what the brain locked onto. This is where self-judgment creeps in. Because when the world tells you that being organized and reliable is a matter of trying harder, and no matter how hard you try, you still struggle, you start believing the problem is you, that you're just not capable, that you're bad at being an adult, that you'll never figure it out. But here's the thing. Executive function struggles are not about intelligence, talent, or effort. They're about brain chemistry. And the moment we recognize that, we can stop shaming ourselves for it and start finding solutions. Sometimes that means external structure, planners, alarms, accountability partners. Sometimes it means working with the brain instead of against it, using momentum, breaking tasks into tiny steps, creating urgency in creative ways. Because here's the truth. An ADHD brain isn't broken, it just runs on a different operating system. And when we stop expecting it to function like everyone else's, we can start making space for what actually works. Fifth, let's talk about self-worth. Because when you grow up hearing you're not living up to your potential, that message doesn't just stay on the surface. It sinks in. It becomes a story you tell yourself. And that story shapes everything. Living with ADHD means living with a brain that doesn't always play by the rules. The world says, be on time, be organized, follow through, stay focused. And when those things don't come easily, it doesn't take long to start believing that maybe you're just bad at life, that no matter how hard you try, you'll always be one step behind, that shame isn't just about missing deadlines or losing your keys. It's about feeling like you are somehow defective. And here's where it gets really tough. ADHD is often invisible. If you break a bone, people see the cast. They understand why you're struggling. But when your challenges are internal, when your brain makes everyday tasks feel like a battlefield, people don't always get it. They see the missed appointments, the unfinished projects, the disorganization, and instead of offering support, they offer judgment. You just need to try harder. You just need to be more disciplined. Now, if you hear those messages enough times, they start to sound like truth. So you start masking. You learn to hide the struggle. You double down on perfectionism, working twice as hard just to keep up. You develop coping mechanisms that might not be healthy, like procrastination fueled by last-minute panic, or avoiding responsibilities altogether because the weight of failing again feels unbearable. But the thing about masking, it's exhausting. It's a full-time job, one that leaves you constantly wondering if you're doing enough, being enough, keeping up enough. And when the mask slips, when the forgotten deadline or impulsive decision happens, it feels like proof that deep down maybe you really are the person you're afraid of being. But that's not the truth. The truth is ADHD isn't a character flaw. It's not a lack of intelligence or ambition or potential. It's a different way of thinking, processing, existing in the world. And when you start recognizing that, when you start separating your struggles from your self-worth, things begin to shift. You stop seeing yourself as broken and start seeing yourself as wired differently. You start looking for ways to work with your brain instead of punishing yourself for not fitting into systems that were never built for you. You start replacing shame with self-compassion, realizing that struggling doesn't mean failing, it means you're human. And I get it. That's easier said than done. Undoing years of self-doubt takes time, but it starts with small things, with noticing the moments you judge yourself harshly and asking, would I say this to a friend? With giving yourself permission to rest without guilt, with acknowledging the wins no matter how small, because they matter. Because at the end of the day, ADHD doesn't define worth. It never has. And the more we recognize that, the more we can start telling a different story, one that isn't built on shame, but on understanding, resilience, and a deep knowing that we are enough. exactly as we are. So here's the truth. ADHD in adulthood isn't just about distractions or forgetting where you put your phone. It's about navigating a world that wasn't built for the way your brain works. It's about managing time that feels slippery, emotions that come in waves, and an internal dialogue that's been shaped by years of trying to keep up. And it's about rewriting that dialogue, not with shame, but with understanding, because here's what I know for sure. The struggle is real, but so is the strength, the creativity, the resilience, the ability to think outside the box, to see connections others miss, to bring passion and energy into the world in ways that can't be taught. ADHD isn't a weakness, it's a different operating system. And the moment you stop fighting against it and start working with it, everything changes. So if you've spent years feeling like you're not enough, like you're falling behind or failing at things that seem easy for everyone else, hear this. You are not broken. You have never been broken. You are wired differently, and that difference is part of what makes you, you. And that's not something to fix. That's something to embrace. Good luck out there. You've got this.